The room buzzed with anticipation as the bright studio lights illuminated the set of The Morning Brief, one of the most popular news shows in the country. People tuning in from their homes or scrolling through social media were eager to see what would unfold. Today's guest was Karoline Leavitt, a political analyst known for her sharp mind and no-nonsense attitude. Across from her sat Kaitlan Collins, a seasoned journalist who had spent years covering some of the biggest stories in politics. The topic on everyone's mind? A controversial set of government policies that had sparked heated debates across the nation. As the cameras rolled and the host introduced the segment, the energy in the room shifted. This wasn't just another interview. It felt like a clash waiting to happen. Both women exuded confidence, but there was an unspoken tension in the air. Karoline adjusted her posture slightly, her calm demeanor masking the intensity she brought to every discussion. Kaitlan, on the other hand, leaned forward ever so slightly, pen in hand, ready to dive into the heart of the matter. Kaitlan began with what seemed like a straightforward question. Do you believe these new regulations will actually help everyday people? Her tone was neutral, almost casual, but there was a subtle edge to it. Karoline didn't hesitate. She took a moment to gather her thoughts before responding, her voice steady and clear. She explained how the regulations aim to tackle long-standing issues while acknowledging that they weren't perfect. Her answer was thorough, leaving little room for ambiguity. But instead of moving on, Kaitlan did something unexpected. She repeated the same question, almost word for word. The audience at home might have missed it at first, but those paying close attention noticed immediately. Karoline raised an eyebrow, her expression shifting ever so slightly. She paused, then replied, I think I covered that pretty clearly. Her tone was polite but firm, hinting at the growing frustration beneath the surface. Kaitlan nodded, seemingly unfazed. But instead of exploring a new angle or digging deeper into Karoline's response, she rephrased the question slightly, adding a vague reference to public opinion polls. It was subtle, but it became clear to both Karoline and the viewers that Kaitlan wasn't looking for answers. She was trying to corner her guest. The repetition was deliberate, and Karoline knew it. By the third time, Kaitlan circled back to the same topic. The tension in the room was palpable. Karoline took a deep breath, her patience wearing thin. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking onto Kaitlan's. Let me clarify something, she said, her voice calm but carrying a weight that silenced the room. If we're going to have a meaningful conversation, it would be helpful if we moved beyond repetition and explored different aspects of this issue. The studio fell silent for a brief moment. Even the host shifted uncomfortably in his seat, sensing the shift in dynamics. Kaitlan hesitated, caught off guard by Karoline's directness, but she didn't back down. Instead, she pressed on, framing the same question in yet another way. At this point, viewers at home were fully invested. Social media platforms lit up with reactions as people debated whether Kaitlan was being fair or simply trying to trap Karoline. Karoline's composure never wavered, but her responses grew sharper. She anticipated Kaitlan's next move, countering each attempt to steer the conversation back to the same point. The exchange was captivating, a verbal sparring match that kept audiences glued to their screens. What started as a routine interview had transformed into something far more intense, a battle of wits where every word mattered. As the minutes ticked by, it became clear that this wasn't just about policy anymore. It was about two strong personalities clashing, each determined to assert control over the narrative. Karoline's confidence only grew stronger, while Kaitlan's persistence began to show cracks. The audience could feel the momentum shifting, and they couldn't look away. The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut with a knife. Kaitlan, sensing that she was losing ground, tried to regain control by leaning further into her line of questioning. She rephrased her question yet again, this time adding a vague reference to public sentiment and expert opinions. But it was clear to everyone watching, this wasn't about seeking clarity anymore. It felt like a deliberate attempt to rattle Karoline, to make her stumble or contradict herself. Karoline, however, wasn't fazed. If anything, she seemed more focused now, She took a moment before responding, her voice calm but laced with precision. "Kaitlan," she said, locking eyes with the journalist across from her, "I've answered this multiple times already. Rephrasing the same question won't change my stance." Her words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. For a split second, Kaitlan looked surprised, as though she hadn't expected such directness. But Kaitlan wasn't one to back down easily. She pressed on, her tone shifting slightly, less neutral, more pointed. "So you're saying these policies are flawless? That there's nothing questionable about them?" It was a loaded question, designed to provoke a reaction, and for a moment, it seemed like it might work. The audience leaned in, waiting to see how Karoline would respond. Instead of taking the bait, Karoline smiled faintly, a small, almost imperceptible curve of her lips that spoke volumes. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms lightly, and said, "Let's be honest here, no policy is perfect, but if we're going to critique something, let's do it constructively. Repeating the same question over and over doesn't add value to the conversation." The room fell silent again. Even the host, who had been trying to interject occasionally to keep things moving, seemed unsure of what to say. Viewers at home erupted into chatter, not just on social media but in living rooms and offices across the country. People were glued to their screens, captivated by the unfolding drama. Some admired Karoline's composure under pressure, while others wondered if Kaitlan's persistence was justified. Kaitlan, clearly frustrated, tried once more to steer the conversation back to her original point. "But don't you think the public deserves answers that address their concerns directly?" she asked, her tone firmer now. It was a clever move, an attempt to frame her repetitive questioning as being on behalf of the viewers. But Karoline saw right through it. She tilted her head slightly, her expression softening just enough to convey empathy without losing authority. "Absolutely," she replied. "The public does deserve transparency, and I've done my best to provide that, but when someone keeps asking the same question in different ways, it feels less like seeking understanding and more like trying to create conflict where none exists." Her response struck a chord, not just with the live audience, but with millions watching from home. Social media exploded with reactions. Clips of the interview began circulating online, accompanied by hashtags like "Thakur stay calm under pressure" and "our call-out culture." Supporters of Karoline praised her ability to remain composed and articulate, while critics accused Kaitlan of grandstanding. The debate spilled over onto talk shows, podcasts, and even late-night comedy routines. Back in the studio, the dynamic between the two women had shifted dramatically. Kaitlan, who had started the interview with an air of confidence, now appeared uneasy. She glanced down at her notes briefly, perhaps searching for a way to pivot. Meanwhile, Karoline sat upright, her posture relaxed but commanding. She wasn't just defending her position anymore. She was owning the conversation. When Kaitlan finally attempted to move on to a new topic, it felt forced. Her earlier momentum had evaporated, replaced by a palpable sense of awkwardness. She asked about potential, long-term effects of the policies, but her delivery lacked its earlier conviction. Karoline seized the opportunity, diving into a detailed explanation that showcased her expertise. She spoke passionately about the importance of balancing short-term fixes with sustainable solutions, weaving in real-world examples that resonated with viewers. By this point, it was clear who had taken charge of the narrative. Karoline's poise and intellect shone brightly, captivating the audience and leaving Kaitlan struggling to keep up. The contrast between the two couldn't have been starker. One methodical and measured, the other flustered and defensive. As the segment neared its end, the host made a final attempt to wrap things up. "Thank you both for joining us today," he said, his tone overly cheerful in an effort to diffuse the lingering tension, but neither woman needed rescuing. Karoline nodded graciously, offering a warm smile to the camera, while Kaitlan managed a tight-lipped nod before quickly gathering her things. Once the camera stopped rolling, the atmosphere backstage was electric. Sources close to the production revealed that Kaitlan left the set visibly frustrated, avoiding eye contact with anyone as she exited. Karoline, on the other hand, walked out with her head held high, shaking hands with crew members and thanking them for their hard work. Outside the studio, reporters swarmed her, eager to hear her thoughts on the viral moment. "I came here today to engage in a thoughtful dialogue," Karoline told them, her confidence unwavering. "Unfortunately, not all conversations go as planned. But I hope this serves as a reminder that substance should always outweigh sensationalism." Her words resonated deeply, earning even more admiration from fans and colleagues alike. For Karoline, the interview marked a defining moment in her career, a testament to her resilience and intellect. And for millions of viewers, it served as a powerful reminder of the importance of staying true to oneself, even in the face of relentless challenges. As Karoline stepped out of the studio, the buzz around her performance was undeniable. Reporters and camera crews swarmed her, microphones thrust forward as everyone clamored to get a reaction. She handled it with the same grace she had shown during the interview, calm, composed, and thoughtful. Her responses were measured but genuine, offering just enough insight to satisfy curiosity without veering into unnecessary drama. "I came here today hoping for an open and honest discussion," she told the reporters gathered around her. "And while things didn't go exactly as planned, I think it's important to focus on what really matters, the issues themselves." Her words carried weight, not because they were rehearsed or polished, but because they felt authentic. People could see that she wasn't trying to play the victim or stir up controversy. She simply wanted to have a meaningful conversation. Meanwhile, backstage, Kaitlan was dealing with her own aftermath. Sources close to the production revealed that she left the set visibly frustrated, avoiding eye contact with anyone as she made her way to her dressing room. It wasn't hard to imagine how she must have felt. Her strategy had backfired spectacularly, leaving her looking unprepared and overly aggressive. For someone used to controlling the narrative, this was unfamiliar territory. Word spread quickly among the crew and staff. Some sympathized with Kaitlan, acknowledging the pressure journalists face when interviewing high-profile guests. Others couldn't help but admire how Karoline had handled herself, turning what could have been a hostile situation into a masterclass in composure. The incident became the talk of the building, with everyone weighing in on who had come out on top. Social media continued to explode with reactions. Clips from the interview were shared endlessly, dissected frame by frame. Memes popped up everywhere, some poking fun at Kaitlan's repetitive questioning, others celebrating Karoline's sharp comebacks. Hashtags like "stay calm under pressure" and "Karoline nailed it" trended for hours, sparking debates across platforms. Talk show hosts joked about the exchange, late-night comedians turned it into skits, and political analysts debated whether Kaitlan's approach was justified or over the line. Amid all the noise, one thing stood out. People were talking about more than just the clash between two personalities. The incident sparked a broader conversation about the role of interviews in shaping public discourse. Many praised Karoline for refusing to be drawn into a petty argument, instead focusing on substance and staying true to her principles. Others argued that Kaitlan's persistence, while perhaps misguided, highlighted the challenges journalists face when trying to hold powerful figures accountable. The next morning, as the story dominated headlines, both women found themselves under intense scrutiny. For Karoline, it was overwhelmingly positive. Fans lauded her poise and intelligence, calling her a role model for anyone navigating difficult conversations. Colleagues reached out to congratulate her, and invitations poured in for appearances on other programs. It was clear that the interview had elevated her profile, solidifying her reputation as someone who could handle even the toughest situations with grace. Kaitlan, on the other hand, faced a wave of criticism. While some defended her methods, arguing that tough questions are necessary in journalism, many accused her of prioritizing sensationalism over substance. A few opinion pieces suggested that her repeated questioning came across as less about seeking answers and more about creating conflict for ratings. Despite the backlash, she remained professional, issuing a brief statement later that day. "In any interview, my goal is always to seek clarity and truth," Kaitlan wrote. "If my line of questioning came across as repetitive, I apologize for that. However, I stand by the importance of pressing for accountability. Her statement was concise and diplomatic, aimed at diffusing the situation without appearing defensive. Yet it did little to quell the ongoing debate about journalistic ethics. For viewers, the incident served as a reminder of the delicate balance required in interviews. On one side, there's the responsibility of journalists to ask tough questions and challenge their guests. On the other, there's the need for fairness and respect, ensuring that discussions remain productive rather than devolving into arguments. The viral moment highlighted how easily that balance can tip, and what happens when it does. As days passed, the dust began to settle, but the ripple effects lingered. Karoline continued to make appearances, using the platform to discuss the very issues that had sparked the heated exchange. She spoke passionately about the importance of constructive dialogue, urging people to focus on solutions rather than conflict. Her message resonated deeply, earning her even more supporters. Kaitlan returned to work as well, though her approach seemed slightly different. Observers noted that her interviews now leaned toward a more balanced tone, perhaps influenced by the lessons learned from the encounter. Whether intentional or not, it signaled a subtle shift, a recognition that sometimes less is more when it comes to asking questions. In the end, the incident wasn't just about two individuals clashing on live TV. It was about the power of communication, the impact of media, and the responsibility we all share in fostering meaningful conversations. For Karoline, it marked a defining moment in her career, a testament to her resilience and ability to rise above adversity. And for millions of viewers, it served as a powerful reminder of the importance of staying grounded, no matter the circumstances. The days following the interview felt like a whirlwind for everyone involved. For Karoline, life became a series of interviews, appearances, and invitations to speak at events. People were eager to hear her thoughts, not just on the policies discussed that day, but also on how she handled herself under pressure. Her ability to remain calm and composed while being pushed into a corner resonated with so many. It wasn't just about what she said. It was about how she said it. She carried herself with dignity, and people noticed. During one of her follow-up interviews on a popular talk show, the host asked her directly, "What was going through your mind when you realized Kaitlan kept repeating the same question?" The audience leaned in, curious to hear her answer. Karoline chuckled softly, shaking her head as if recalling the moment vividly. "Honestly," she began, "I knew exactly what was happening. I could tell it wasn't about getting an answer anymore. It was about trying to trip me up. So instead of letting frustration take over, I decided to focus on staying respectful and sticking to my points." Her response earned applause from the live studio audience. What struck people most was her honesty. She didn't sugarcoat anything or pretend she hadn't felt irritated. Instead, she admitted to feeling tested, but emphasized how she chose to rise above it. That vulnerability made her even more relatable. Viewers at home saw her not just as a polished analyst, but as someone who faced challenges like anyone else and handled them with grace. Meanwhile, Kaitlan's world was quieter, but no less chaotic. While she continued working, appearing on various programs and covering breaking news stories, there was a noticeable shift in public perception. Social media commentary ranged from supportive messages encouraging her to keep doing her job to harsh criticism, accusing her of sensationalism. Some colleagues rallied around her, defending her tactics as part of the tough scrutiny required in journalism. Others privately questioned whether her approach had crossed a line. One evening, during a panel discussion on journalistic ethics hosted by a major university, the moderator brought up the incident indirectly. "When does persistence in questioning become counterproductive?" he asked the group of seasoned reporters seated before him. Though no names were mentioned, everyone in the room understood the subtext. One veteran journalist leaned forward thoughtfully, saying, "There's a fine line between holding someone accountable and creating conflict for the sake of drama. As journalists, we have to ask ourselves, are we serving the truth or feeding the noise?" The comment sparked a lively debate among the panelists, reflecting the broader conversation happening across the country. Some argued that tough questions are essential, especially when dealing with complex issues, Others countered that repetition without progression can alienate both guests and audiences. Kaitlan watched clips of the discussion later that night, her expression unreadable. Whether she agreed or disagreed with the critiques, she kept those thoughts to herself. For now. Back online, memes and jokes about the infamous interview continued to circulate. Late-night comedians milked it for laughs, often exaggerating Kaitlan's repetitive questioning for comedic effect. One sketch featured two puppets reenacting the scene, with one puppet endlessly asking variations of the same question while the other responded with increasingly sarcastic answers. Audiences roared with laughter, but behind the humor lay a deeper reflection on communication styles and their consequences. Despite the polarized reactions, something positive emerged from the chaos, a renewed focus on meaningful dialogue. Educators used the incident as a case study in classrooms, discussing the importance of active listening and constructive conversations. Parents shared videos of the exchange with their kids, using it as a teaching moment about handling disagreements respectfully. Even workplaces incorporated it into training sessions, emphasizing the value of clarity and patience in professional settings. For Karoline, this unexpected outcome reinforced her belief in staying true to oneself. In an emotional post on social media, she wrote, "Sometimes life throws challenges our way that test not only our knowledge but also our character. When faced with difficult moments, remember this. You don't need to win every argument to earn respect. Stay grounded, stay kind, and let your actions speak louder than words." The post went viral, amassing thousands of likes and shares within hours. As weeks turned into months, the incident gradually faded from the headlines, but its impact endured. Karoline became a sought-after speaker at conferences and seminars, where she championed the idea of productive discourse. Her talks weren't just about politics, they were about fostering understanding in a world often divided by shouting matches. Attendees left inspired, carrying her message back to their communities. Kaitlan, too, evolved in subtle ways. Observers noted that her interviewing style softened slightly, focusing less on aggressive probing and more on thoughtful engagement. Whether this change stemmed from self-reflection or external feedback, no one could say for sure. What mattered was that she adapted, a sign of growth for any professional. Ultimately, the clash served as a mirror reflecting society's collective struggles with communication. It reminded us that every question has a purpose, every answer carries weight, and every interaction shapes perceptions. For Karoline, it was a moment of triumph, not because she won the argument, but because she stayed true to her values. And for Kaitlan, it was a lesson in resilience, not just in facing criticism, but in learning from it. In the end, the story wasn't about who came out on top. It was about the power of human connection, the art of listening, and the courage to navigate conflicts with integrity. Those tuning in to watch the original interview months later found themselves reflecting not just on the heated exchange, but on the bigger picture. How do we engage with each other in a way that builds bridges rather than walls? Months after the viral interview, the ripple effects continued to shape not just Karoline's and Kaitlan's careers, but also public conversations about media, accountability, and communication. What had started as a heated exchange on live TV had evolved into something far greater, a catalyst for introspection about how we engage with each other in an age of constant noise. For Karoline, the aftermath was transformative. She found herself at the center of a movement that celebrated authenticity and thoughtful dialogue. Invitations poured in from all corners, from universities eager to host her as a guest speaker, to community organizations seeking her insights on fostering respectful conversations. Her message resonated deeply because it wasn't political or divisive. It was universal. "We're all human," she often said during these talks, "and no matter where we stand on an issue, we can still treat each other with respect." One event stood out in particular, a town hall meeting held in a small Midwest city. The topic? Bridging divides in polarized communities. Hundreds of people gathered in a modest auditorium, filling every seat and spilling into the aisles. When Karoline took the stage, there was an immediate hush. She began by sharing her experience from the infamous interview, not to relive the Drama, but to highlight a broader lesson. I've been in situations where I felt like someone was trying to push me into a corner, she admitted, her voice warm and inviting. And let me tell you, it's not easy. But here's what I learned. You don't have to fight fire with fire. Sometimes staying calm says more than any comeback ever could. The crowd nodded along, hanging on to her every word. Later, during the Q&A session, a young woman raised her hand. How do you stay so calm when someone is clearly trying to provoke you? She asked, her tone earnest. Karoline smiled, pausing for a moment before answering. It's not always easy, she confessed, but I remind myself why I'm there, to share ideas, to listen, and hopefully to make a difference. If I lose my cool, I'm not helping anyone. Not myself, not the audience, and certainly not the person asking the questions. Her response earned a round of applause, but more importantly, it sparked meaningful discussions among attendees long after the event ended. People stayed behind, exchanging stories about their own struggles with conflict and how they hoped to apply Karoline's advice in their daily lives. For many, the evening became a turning point, a reminder that even in disagreement, kindness matters. On the other side of the spectrum, Kaitlan navigated her new reality with quiet determination. While the backlash had stung, she refused to let it define her. Instead, she channeled the experience into growth, refining her approach to journalism. Observers noticed subtle changes in her interviews, fewer attempts to corner guests, more emphasis on open-ended questions that encouraged deeper exploration. It wasn't a complete overhaul of her style, but it signaled a shift toward balance. During a rare sit-down interview with a respected industry publication, Kaitlan opened up about the incident. I've been doing this job for years and I know criticism comes with the territory, she said, her tone reflective. But this time felt different. It made me step back and ask myself, am I asking the right questions? And am I doing it in a way that serves the audience rather than alienates them? Her candor struck a chord with readers. Some praised her willingness to self-reflect, while others remained skeptical, questioning whether her comments were genuine or merely damage control. Regardless, the interview marked a pivotal moment in her career, one where she acknowledged the weight of her role as a journalist and the responsibility that came with it. Meanwhile, the debate over journalistic ethics raged on in academic circles and online forums. Scholars dissected the incident from every angle, analyzing everything from body language to word choice. One professor published an essay arguing that the clash illustrated a growing disconnect between traditional journalism and modern audiences. People want transparency, not theatrics, he wrote. They want reporters who challenge authority without resorting to sensationalism. The essay went viral, sparking heated discussions across platforms. Journalists weighed in, sharing their perspectives on the challenges of balancing tough questions with fairness. Some defended Kaitlan's methods, insisting that persistence is key to uncovering truth. Others sided with Karoline, advocating for a more collaborative approach to interviews. The back and forth highlighted the complexity of the issue, underscoring the fact that there's rarely a one-size-fits-all solution. Amid the ongoing discourse, one thing became clear. The incident had left an indelible mark on both women and the industries they represented. For Karoline, it solidified her status as a voice of reason, a beacon of composure in turbulent times. For Kaitlan, it served as a wake-up call, prompting her to reevaluate her methods and adapt to changing expectations. Beyond the headlines and hashtags, the story resonated on a personal level for countless viewers. Families gathered around dinner, tables to discuss the importance of patience and empathy in disagreements. Teachers used the interview as a case study in classrooms, encouraging students to think critically about communication styles. Even casual observers found themselves reflecting on their own interactions, wondering how they might handle similar situations. In workplaces, the incident sparked conversations about leadership and conflict resolution. Managers cited Karoline's poise as an example of how to navigate high-pressure scenarios without losing sight of core values. Employees shared anecdotes about moments when they'd faced difficult conversations and how they wished they'd responded differently. The takeaway was simple yet profound. How we communicate shapes not just outcomes but relationships. As time passed, the dust settled, but the lessons lingered. Both Karoline and Kaitlan moved forward, carrying the experience with them in different ways. For Karoline, it reinforced her belief in leading with integrity and focusing on substance over spectacle. For Kaitlan, it underscored the importance of adaptability and humility in an ever-evolving field. Looking back, neither woman could have predicted the lasting impact of that single morning. What began as a routine interview transformed into a cultural moment, a mirror reflecting society's strengths and weaknesses in how we connect, converse, and confront challenges. And while opinions about the incident varied widely, one truth emerged. In a world often defined by division, moments like these remind us of our shared humanity and the power of choosing grace over grievance. As the months rolled on, the incident continued to ripple through society in unexpected ways. It wasn't just a story confined to news cycles or social media debates anymore. It had seeped into everyday conversations, classrooms, and workplaces. People found themselves revisiting the moment not as a spectacle, but as a learning opportunity. The exchange between Karoline and Kaitlan became shorthand for discussions about communication styles, accountability, and resilience. For Karoline, this newfound role as an advocate for thoughtful dialogue opened doors she hadn't anticipated. She began receiving letters, not emails or tweets, but handwritten notes from people across the country. Many were from teachers who shared how they used her calm demeanor during the interview as a model for their students. Others came from parents describing how they played clips of the interview to teach their kids about staying composed under pressure. Some were deeply personal, recounting stories of struggles with conflict at work or within families. One letter stood out among the rest. It was from a young man serving in the military stationed overseas. He wrote about how he'd stumbled upon the interview while scrolling through YouTube late one night. "I've been in situations where I felt attacked or misunderstood," he confessed. "Watching you handle that situation reminded me that it's okay to take a step back and breathe before responding. Sometimes silence speaks louder than anger." Karoline read the letter several times, her eyes welling up each time. She realized then that her actions during those tense moments weren't just about defending herself. They had become a source of inspiration for others facing their own battles. It humbled her and deepened her commitment to using her platform wisely. Meanwhile, Kaitlan quietly embraced the lessons she'd learned from the experience. While some critics still brought up the incident occasionally, she focused on refining her craft. Her interviews grew more nuanced, with questions designed to encourage reflection rather than provoke defensiveness. During a live segment covering a contentious policy debate, viewers noticed a marked difference in her approach. Instead of repeatedly circling back to the same point, she allowed her guest space to elaborate, creating room for genuine discussion. Afterward, a viewer tweeted, "Kaitlan seems different lately, less combative, more curious. It's refreshing." The comment gained traction, sparking a thread of responses agreeing that her evolution as a journalist was worth acknowledging. For Kaitlan, these small signs of approval meant everything. They validated the effort she'd put into rethinking her methods and reinforced her belief in continuous growth. The broader cultural conversation around the incident also evolved over time. What started as debates about journalistic ethics expanded into discussions about human behavior. Podcasts dedicated episodes to exploring why certain communication styles resonate while others alienate. One popular episode featured experts in psychology and conflict resolution, analyzing the dynamics of the interview. They highlighted how Karoline's ability to stay grounded activated a sense of trust in viewers, while Kaitlan's repetitive questioning triggered feelings of frustration. Listeners called in sharing their own experiences. A caller described being on the receiving end of aggressive questioning during a job interview and how it left her feeling defensive instead of open. Another talked about a heated argument with a neighbor that escalated because neither side was willing to listen. These anecdotes underscored a universal truth. How we communicate shapes not only the outcome of a conversation, but also the emotional tone surrounding it. In schools, Educators incorporated the incident into lesson plans on effective communication. Middle school teachers staged mock interviews, encouraging students to practice active listening and respectful responses. High school debate teams analyzed the exchange, discussing strategies for framing arguments without resorting to hostility. Even college professors teaching media studies referenced the interview when discussing the responsibilities of journalists in shaping public discourse. Parents, too, found value in the example set by both women. At dinner tables and family gatherings, conversations often turned to the topic of handling disagreements. "Remember that interview?" one father asked his teenage son, after a particularly heated argument about chores. "What did you think about how Karoline stayed calm even when things got tough?" The question sparked a thoughtful discussion about patience and perspective, turning what could have been a fleeting squabble into a teachable moment. Workplaces also embraced the lessons from the incident. Managers held team-building workshops, focused on constructive feedback and conflict resolution. Employees participated in role-playing exercises designed to simulate challenging interactions, practicing techniques like pausing before responding or reframing confrontational language. In one company-wide meeting, a supervisor played a clip of the interview and asked employees to reflect on how they might apply its lessons in their daily interactions. Even late-night comedians, who had initially mined the incident for laughs, shifted their tone over time. Where once they joked about Kaitlan's repetitive questioning, they now poked fun at the absurdity of modern communication breakdowns. One sketch featured two co-workers arguing over office supplies, with one mimicking Kaitlan's style of asking the same question in slightly different ways. The humor came not from mocking either woman, but from recognizing the universal tendency to talk past each other instead of truly engaging. For Karoline, the enduring impact of the incident solidified her belief in the power of authenticity. She often reflected on how staying true to her values had resonated so deeply with others. "It's easy to get caught up in trying to win an argument or prove a point," she told an audience at a leadership conference. "But real strength lies in knowing when to stand firm and when to let go. It's about finding balance, not just for yourself but for the sake of the conversation." Kaitlan, too, came to appreciate the value of adaptability. In a candid moment during a panel discussion on the future of journalism, she admitted, "This experience taught me that growth doesn't come from staying comfortable. It comes from stepping back, reassessing, and being willing to change, even when it's hard." Her words earned nods of agreement from fellow panelists and applause from the audience. Ultimately, the legacy of the incident wasn't defined by who won or lost that day on live TV. It was defined by the countless ways it inspired people to reflect on their own communication styles and strive for better connections. For Karoline, it reinforced her mission to foster understanding and empathy. For Kaitlan, it marked a turning point in her journey toward becoming a more thoughtful interviewer. And for everyone else, it served as a reminder that every interaction, no matter how small, is an opportunity to choose grace over grievance, curiosity over conflict, and humanity over hostility. The ripple effects of that unforgettable morning stretched far beyond the lives of Karoline and Kaitlan, embedding themselves into the fabric of everyday conversations. It wasn't just about what had happened on camera anymore. It was about how it made people rethink their own roles in communication. From living rooms to boardrooms, from classrooms to coffee shops, the incident became a touchstone for understanding conflict, accountability, and human connection. For Karoline, the momentum only grew stronger. Her ability to remain composed under pressure turned her into a symbol of resilience. People began approaching her after events or reaching out online, sharing stories of how her calm demeanor inspired them to handle difficult moments differently. A grandmother once stopped her outside a bookstore, clutching a copy of one of Karoline's books. "You don't know me," she said softly, "but I watched your interview when my grandson was giving me a hard time about moving into assisted living. Watching you stay so calm helped me keep my cool during our talks." Karoline smiled warmly, touched by the unexpected connection. These encounters reminded her that her actions carried weight, not just professionally, but personally. She started incorporating these stories into her speeches, weaving them into broader discussions about empathy and courage. "We all face moments when we feel cornered or misunderstood," she'd say, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. "But those are the moments where we get to choose who we want to be. Do we react out of frustration, or do we take a breath and respond with grace?" Her message resonated deeply because it wasn't preachy or theoretical. It was grounded in real-life experiences. Audiences left her talks not just entertained but empowered, armed with practical tools for navigating life's inevitable conflicts. One attendee described it as a masterclass in staying human. Another wrote on social media, "I used to think being strong meant never backing down. Now I realize true strength is knowing when to hold your ground and when to listen." Kaitlan, meanwhile, continued to evolve quietly but purposefully. While some critics still brought up the infamous interview occasionally, she focused less on defending herself and more on improving her craft. She sought feedback from colleagues, read extensively about effective interviewing techniques, and even attended workshops on active listening. Slowly but surely, her approach shifted. Questions became less confrontational and more exploratory, designed to invite dialogue rather than provoke defensiveness. During a live segment covering a heated political debate, viewers noticed this transformation firsthand. Instead of pressing her guest repeatedly on a single point, Kaitlan allowed the conversation to flow naturally. When her guest hesitated or stumbled over an answer, she gave them space to clarify instead of jumping in with another pointed question. Afterward, social media lit up with praise. "Wow, Kaitlan let the guest actually finish their thoughts," one viewer tweeted. "Feels like a whole new vibe." The positive feedback buoyed Kaitlan's confidence, reinforcing her belief that change, no matter how challenging, is always possible. In quieter moments, she reflected on the lessons she'd learned. "Growth isn't linear," she told a close friend over coffee one afternoon. "It's messy and uncomfortable, but it's worth it. If I can make someone feel heard instead of attacked, then I've done my job." Beyond the personal journeys of both women, the incident sparked a cultural shift in how people thought about communication. Conversations about conflict resolution became mainstream, popping up everywhere from parenting blogs to corporate training sessions. One viral TikTok video featured a young woman breaking down the dynamics of the interview, explaining how Karoline's composure demonstrated emotional intelligence, while Kaitlan's repetitive questioning highlighted the dangers of escalating tension unnecessarily. The video amassed millions of views, sparking debates in the comments section about whether persistence or patience was more effective in tough conversations. Even late-night comedians, who had initially poked fun at the exchange, began using it as a lens to examine broader societal issues. One sketch portrayed a couple arguing over dinner, with one partner mimicking Kaitlan's style of asking the same question 5 different ways. The punchline came when the other partner calmly responded like Karoline, turning the argument into a moment of mutual understanding. The audience erupted in laughter, but beneath the humor lay a deeper truth. We all fall into patterns of unproductive communication, and recognizing those patterns is the first step toward breaking them. In schools, educators seize the opportunity to teach critical thinking and emotional regulation through the lens of the incident. Middle school teachers staged mock interviews, encouraging students to practice active listening and respectful responses. High school debate teams analyzed the exchange, discussing strategies for framing arguments without resorting to hostility. Even college professors teaching media studies referenced the interview when discussing the responsibilities of journalists in shaping public discourse. Parents, too, found value in the example set by both women. At dinner tables and family gatherings, conversations often turned to the topic of handling disagreements. "Remember that interview?" one father asked his teenage son after a particularly heated argument about chores. "What did you think about how Karoline stayed calm even when things got tough?" The question sparked a thoughtful discussion about patience and perspective, turning what could have been a fleeting squabble into a teachable moment. Workplaces also embraced the lessons from the incident. Managers held team-building workshops, focused on constructive feedback and conflict resolution. Employees participated in role-playing exercises designed to simulate challenging interactions, practicing techniques like pausing before responding or reframing confrontational language. In one company-wide meeting, a supervisor played a clip of the interview and asked employees to reflect on how they might apply its lessons in their daily interactions. Even community organizations got involved, hosting panels and forums on fostering civil discourse. One event brought together local leaders, activists, and residents to discuss how to bridge divides in polarized communities. During the Q&A session, an older man stood up and shared how he'd recently mended a strained relationship with his neighbor by adopting Karoline's approach of staying calm and listening intently. "It wasn't easy," he admitted, "but it worked. And now we're talking again." As time went on, the incident stopped being just a story. It became a movement. People across the country found themselves referencing it in everyday conversations, using it as a benchmark for better communication. For Karoline, it reinforced her mission to foster understanding and empathy. For Kaitlan, it marked a turning point in her journey toward becoming a more thoughtful interviewer. And for everyone else, it served as a reminder that every interaction, no matter how small, is an opportunity to choose grace over grievance, curiosity over conflict, and humanity over hostility. In the end, the legacy of that day wasn't defined by who won or lost. It was defined by the countless ways it inspired people to reflect on their own communication styles and strive for better connections. Whether in moments of tension or triumph, the lessons lived on, a testament to the enduring power of staying true to oneself and treating others with respect. Months turned into a year, and the incident that had once dominated headlines became more than just a memory. It became part of the cultural fabric. It wasn't something people forgot. Instead, it lingered in the background, shaping how they approached disagreements and difficult conversations. The ripple effects continued to unfold in subtle yet profound ways, touching lives far beyond what either Karoline or Kaitlan could have imagined. For Karoline, the journey had transformed her from a respected analyst into a beacon of hope for many. She didn't seek fame or recognition, but she embraced the responsibility that came with being seen as a role model. Her speeches evolved over time, shifting from reflections on policy debates to broader discussions about humanity itself. At one particularly moving event, a community gathering focused on mental health, she shared a deeply personal story about her own struggles with staying calm under pressure. "I'm not perfect," she admitted, her voice steady, but filled with emotion. "There are days when I feel like snapping back like everyone else, but I remind myself of something my grandmother used to say. A gentle word can turn away anger. That's what keeps me grounded. The idea that kindness isn't weakness, it's strength." Her words resonated with the audience, many of whom nodded along, some wiping away tears. Afterward, dozens lined up to thank her, sharing their own stories of conflict and resolution. One woman held her hand tightly and whispered, "You've given me permission to be kinder, to others and to myself." Moments like these reminded Karoline why she kept showing up, even when the spotlight felt heavy. Kaitlan, too, found herself changed by the experience. While she still faced occasional criticism, she no longer let it define her. Instead, she channeled her energy into becoming a better journalist, one who prioritized understanding over confrontation. During a high-profile interview months later, viewers noticed a striking difference in her demeanor. When her guest stumbled over a complex answer, Kaitlan leaned forward slightly, her expression softening. "Take your time," she said gently. "This is important and we want to get it right." The moment went viral, sparking praise from colleagues and audiences alike. Critics who had once accused her of sensationalism now acknowledged her growth, calling her a more thoughtful interviewer. For Kaitlan, this shift wasn't just professional, it was personal. She realized that journalism wasn't just about asking tough questions. It was about fostering trust and creating space for meaningful dialogue. The broader cultural impact of the incident only deepened with time. Conversations about communication styles became commonplace, woven into everyday life in ways both big and small. Parents taught their children the importance of listening before responding. Teachers encouraged students to practice patience during disagreements. Even strangers at bus stops or grocery stores struck up conversations about the value of empathy in an increasingly polarized world. One evening, a local bookstore hosted a panel discussion titled, "Finding Common Ground: Lessons from Conflict." Attendees packed the cozy space, eager to hear perspectives from writers, educators, and community leaders. When the moderator asked how the infamous interview had influenced their work, nearly every panelist mentioned it. A teacher talked about using clips of the exchange to teach conflict resolution skills. A writer described how the incident inspired her latest novel, which explored themes of forgiveness and connection. But perhaps the most poignant moment came when a young man stood up during the Q&A session. He introduced himself as someone who had struggled with anger issues for years. "I watched that interview after a really bad argument with my best friend," he said, his voice trembling. "Seeing how Karoline stayed calm made me realize I didn't have to react so strongly all the time. So I apologized to my friend, and we're working things out now. It sounds simple, but it changed everything for me." The room erupted in applause, and several panelists wiped away tears. In that moment, it was clear that the incident had transcended its original context. It wasn't just about two women on live TV anymore. It was about the power of human connection and the choices we make in moments of tension. Even late-night comedians, who had initially poked fun at the exchange, began incorporating its lessons into their routines. One comedian joked about trying to use Karoline-style patience while arguing with his teenager about curfew. "I took a deep breath, stayed calm, and got laughed at anyway," he quipped. "But hey, at least I tried." The joke landed because it rang true. Everyone knew what it felt like to try and fail, only to keep going anyway. In workplaces, managers continued to draw inspiration from the incident, using it as a case study in leadership training programs. Employees participated in workshops where they practiced reframing confrontational language and actively listening without interrupting. One participant later wrote a heartfelt email to the facilitator saying, "I never thought I'd learn so much from watching a news interview, but here we are. Thank you for helping me see conflict differently." As the anniversary of the incident approached, media outlets revisited the story, reflecting on its lasting impact. Articles highlighted how it sparked nationwide conversations about empathy, accountability, and resilience. Podcasts dedicated episodes to analyzing why the moment resonated so deeply, with guests ranging from psychologists to everyday listeners sharing their takeaways. Social media buzzed with posts commemorating the occasion, many accompanied by hashtags like "talking grace over grievance" and "topping lessons from the interview." For Karoline and Kaitlan, the milestone served as a reminder of how far they'd come and how much farther they could go. They hadn't spoken directly since that day, but there was a quiet mutual respect between them. Both understood that their paths had intertwined in ways neither could have predicted, leaving indelible marks on each other and the world around them. Looking back, neither woman would call the incident easy or even pleasant, but both recognized its significance. For Karoline, it reinforced her belief in staying true to her values, even in the face of adversity. For Kaitlan, it underscored the importance of adaptability and humility in an ever-changing field. And for everyone else, it served as a powerful reminder that every interaction carries the potential for growth, understanding, and transformation. In the end, the legacy of that morning wasn't defined by who won or lost. It was defined by the countless ways it inspired people to reflect on their own communication styles and strive for better connections. Whether in moments of tension or triumph, the lessons lived on, a testament to the enduring power of choosing grace over grievance, curiosity over conflict, and humanity over hostility.